All right, guys, we're going to talk about expressions now. This is an introduction to expressions, and I'm just going to talk about terminology in this video. All right, terminology is a big deal. We don't want to shy away from it. So there are a bunch of variables in here. There are a bunch of constants and coefficients and terms, and all of those things have names. I want to make sure we know exactly what they all are. All right, so first off, if I look at this thing, there are some unknowns, the x's, right? So this thing and this thing, those are called variables. They stand for numbers. So they represent numbers. I may not know what they are, but right now I'm just going to put a filler in there. We call those variables. It can be X, Y, Z, W, A, B, C. It can be any letter that represents a number. So variables represent numbers. All right. The other thing I see in here is that next to that variable, you have a number attached to it. Now, we all know that that's an exponent, right? So I don't need to necessarily talk about that in terms of the expression. But the number that is attached to the variable, so there's one here and there's one there, that thing is called a to go with, right? Coefficient. That's a coefficient, right? That's the number attached to the variable. That is attached to the variable. All right. So we have variables. We have things attached to the variables. Let me choose another color, purple. There are numbers that are not attached to any variables like this. And notice that I'm going to include the sign with it. That thing is called a constant. If I'm talking about things that don't change, they remain the same, I'm talking about a constant. It's just a number by itself. All right, it's just a number by itself. In parentheses, I'll say include the sign. And by including the sign, I mean in front of it. All right. So far we have variables in red, coefficients in blue, and constants all by themselves. The only other thing I want to talk about is that when we look at this whole thing, well, not the only thing, but one of the next things I want to talk about. If we look at this whole thing, there are three pieces. There's one piece, there's one piece, and there's one piece. Because each of those things are separated by addition and subtraction, we call those things terms. So that's a term, that's a term, that's a term. So the whole combination, this whole piece is a term. This whole piece, again, include the sign in front of it, is a term. And this whole piece is a term. All right, so if I were to put that into words, I would say a term is a part that is separated by addition or subtraction. That's what a term is. Sorry for the yellow. All right. So when you count up the number of terms, you can tell me how many terms are in there. We have this expression, this whole combination. When I say expression, I mean, and I'm going to put this in black with a star. An expression is when you put all of that stuff together. All of this combined. All these things together make up an expression. So this whole thing right here, this whole thing is called an expression. All right. This expression happens to have three terms. When it has one term, so one term equals a monomial, mono. A two-termed expression is called a binomial, just another name. A three-term is called a trinomial for three. Everything above that is just you just use like numbers like 4-term, 5-term, 6-term, that kind of thing. So I could ask you for bits and pieces in our homework, which is actually in quizzes this time. We'll ask you for the bits and pieces of this expression. Oh, sorry about that. So that's just the introduction. We'll do an example or two here in a little bit. All right.